What happens when you get an unlimited chance to relive your life over and over again, but each time you're in a race to save your family? This is the story of a man who is stuck in a time loop that made him relive the same day 200 times so he can find a way to save his family and also save the world from the looming apocalypse. This is the recap of the movie boss level. Enjoy the story.
Okay, let's do this.
Roy Pulver is a retired Delta Force operative who is caught in a relentless and deadly time loop. He's lived through the same day 139 times, each reset starting at exactly 7 a.m. Every morning, a hitman bursts into his apartment to kill him and the woman he's with. Then, moments later, a helicopter appears outside and opens fire on the apartment until it explodes. But by now, Roy knows the rhythm of the chaos. He steps over the killer and then times the gunfire before killing the man on the helicopter. He then jumps out the window, landing on a moving sand truck, a maneuver that had taken him 22 painful tries to perfect. After he escapes immediate death, he steals a car, and this immediately triggers a high-speed pursuit with two relentless assassins in a minivan. Roy had already nicknamed them Pam and Esmeralda. Roy can survive as long as he dodges a city bus, but this time he forgets about the bus, and he is killed as the loop resets. The day repeats endlessly, with only minor differences each time based on his split-second decisions. Beyond Pam and the helicopter, Roy is hunted by several bizarre killers. Amongst them is Guanine, a deadly swordswoman; Kaboom, a manic bomber; Smiley, who prefers brutal executions; the cold-blooded German twins; and the most mysterious one, Roy No. 2, who is a near-identical assassin. Even when Roy eliminates some of them, the others always find and kill him, resetting everything again. He suspects his ex-wife, Gemma, is somehow connected to the loop. But each time he calls her workplace, Dino Laboratories, the phone is answered by her boss, Colonel Ventor, who coldly tells him that Gemma died in an accident. Roy doesn't buy it, and he believes she was murdered, but he never survives long enough to dig deeper. On rare successful runs, Roy makes it past Pam and the bus and reaches Jake's diner. There, he quickly takes a seat by the bar just across from where a famous lethal swordswoman called Di Fong usually sits. If Roy makes it, he drowns his frustration with alcohol, sitting beside a conspiracy theorist who keeps telling stories that almost sound believable. But no matter what he does, by exactly 12:47 p.m., the killers always track him down. He's never survived beyond that exact time. Each attempt to break the pattern ends in death. He's tried every variation, every route, every tactic. But still, he dies every time. After one reset, he remembers the day before the loop began, about visiting Gemma at her lab. She'd left him a vague message about a job opening, but when he arrived, it quickly became clear she wasn't after his resume. Instead, she collected samples from him, including his hair and blood. She also took measurements, all under the watchful eyes of Colonel Ventor and his henchman, Brett, who were observing silently through security feeds. Whatever she was working on, it involved Roy. And now, trapped in this violent loop with no escape, no answers, and no future past 12:47, Roy must find a way to outwit death, uncover the truth, and maybe, just maybe, break the cycle before he runs out of lives. In the meantime, Roy confronts Gemma about the mysterious device she's been secretly developing. So, she reveals its terrifying capabilities as she tells him that it is a machine with the power to reverse all of time and space. It was something so dangerous that it could obliterate the planet if mishandled. But the conversation takes a different turn when Roy brings up their son, Joe. He has no idea Roy is his real father, as he's been made to believe that Roy was only a close family friend. Although Roy pleads for a chance to be in Joe's life, Gemma avoids the topic. Just then, they're interrupted by Brett, who reminds Gemma that her lab is a restricted area. So, she quickly dismisses Roy, but not before whispering to him that she sent him a birthday gift and then cryptically tell him to remember Osiris. Ventor was suspicious of Roy's visit, so he instructed Brett to deal with him and told him to hire untraceable assassins instead of their soldiers. That night, Roy had tried to drown his frustration at a bar, where he met Alice. As he starts to flirt with her, a call comes in. It was Gemma, who sounded distressed and asked for help. Before she can say more, the call is cut off by Ventor. Although Roy hesitates a little, he ultimately ignores the call and stays with Alice that night. Meanwhile, back in the lab, Gemma takes Roy's hair and blood and feeds it into her machine. When Ventor sees this, he immediately declares that she has gone rogue, and he sends Brett to eliminate her. This was the last normal day Roy lived before the time loop began. In the present, Roy recalls the conversation he had with Gemma and remembers the birthday present she mentioned. He finally opens it and finds a book titled Iset and Osiris, with a note from Gemma on the back cover that says time waits for no man. Distracted by the book, Roy forgets to take the necessary steps to avoid the assassins and dies 2 more times before managing to escape with the book. While trying to escape this time, he notices a button in the car he always hijacks, one he had never pressed before. Pressing it makes the car go much faster, causing him to miss the usual exit to Jake's diner. Instead, Roy ends up at an underground mall, where he sits down to read the book. He doesn't understand its relevance to his situation, and he is interrupted when he sees his son, Joe, buying something from an older kid. Realizing that Joe is the only family he has left now that Gemma is dead, Roy follows him into an arcade. There, he scolds Joe for skipping school and asks what he bought. Joe reveals that he only purchased trading cards, not anything illegal. Roy then invites Joe to lunch, and as they leave the arcade, Roy notices it's 12:50. This is the longest he's survived since the loop had started. Roy realizes that the metal walls of the diner and the underground mall must have blocked the assassins from tracking him. Unfortunately, the assassins soon arrive, and Roy is shot several times while shielding Joe with his body. He manages to tell him that he is his father before dying. The day resets, and Roy confronts the man who always breaks into his apartment, demanding to know about the tracker. When he gets no answers, he heads to the diner, where he inspects his body, even checking inside his mouth, but finds nothing. Outside, he remembers that the conspiracy theorist at the diner always claims to know about trackers, and he asks for his advice. The man suggests that the tracker could be hidden in Roy's teeth, triggering a flashback memory of Alice, who is a dental hygienist, putting him under anesthesia while Brett watched. She was part of the trap all along. Determined to find the tracker, Roy gets alcohol and pliers from Jake and begins pulling out his teeth in the bathroom until he finally discovers the tracker. However, he is killed shortly after by Roy number 2. When the day resets again, Roy confronts Alice, who admits she was paid by Brett to implant the tracker. After this revelation, Roy follows his usual routine until he removes the tracker at Jake's diner and uses it to set a trap in an abandoned building. When Pam tracks him there, Roy ambushes and kills her with her own gun when she refuses to reveal who hired her. Despite his newfound freedom without the tracker, Roy realizes that Gemma put him in this time loop for a reason. However, with no way to save her, everything feels pointless. His only remaining goal is revenge, and he takes pleasure in killing all the assassins that have been hunting him. On one of the phones he took from one of the assassins, Roy calls Brett and promises to find both Brett and Ventor. He then drives to the laboratory where the Osiris Spindle is located, but his attempt to break in fails. When Brett shoots him, the day resets once more. Now determined to infiltrate the lab, Roy tries various methods to sneak in. He crashes his car, plants bombs, and even pretends to be his doppelganger, Roy number 2. Eventually, he learns how to navigate the lab's security systems and avoids detection by guards and cameras. After numerous attempts, Roy figures out how to smuggle weapons inside, but his next challenge is Guanine, who wields her sword with deadly precision. Each time Roy confronts her, she kills him, and Venta gloats about his plan to reset history during Roy's final moments. In one of the loops, Roy learns the machine is called the Osiris Spindle, a device designed to reset time. That was when it dawned on him that Gemma, who helped develop the spindle, deliberately involved him in this scenario to stop Ventor. Empowered by the realization that Gemma still believes in him, Roy embarks on a new plan. First, Roy removes the tracking device from his tooth. Then, he approaches Di Fong, the sword master he's admired from a distance at the diner. He asks her for sword fighting lessons. Then through many loops, Roy sharpened his skills, eventually becoming proficient enough to defeat Guanine in battle. After disarming her and cutting off her ponytail to mock her, Roy kills Guanine using her own sword. Moments later, Brett attacks Roy, but Roy quickly takes him out when he stabs him in the forehead, and then Roy engages in a fistfight with Ventor. When Ventor attempts to grab the gun on the floor, Roy recovers his sword and nails Ventor's hand to the floor. He then tells Ventor that no one ought to have the power to rewrite history, arguing that humanity must learn from the past. But Ventor mocked his reasoning and instead calls Roy an absent father, implying that Roy's son Joe may be in danger. Enraged, Roy kills Ventor and rushes to the mall, where he had always met with Joe. Unfortunately, Roy arrives too late and discovers that Joe is already dead. Roy is overwhelmed with grief as he realizes that this tragedy must have happened countless times across the time loops, and he had been too consumed with revenge and survival to notice. As he tries to approach his son's body, the police hold him back. Suddenly, a blinding light fills the sky. It's the end of the world, just as Gemma had warned. Roy is hit with the crushing weight of guilt as he had ignored Gemma's cries for help. He had abandoned her and now, their son is dead. Hopeless and broken, Roy stops trying. In subsequent resets, he allows himself to be killed without resistance. Over and over again, he dies, without even trying to fight back. But somewhere in the loop, he begins to think about Joe, not as someone to protect, but as someone he needs to know better. So he starts picking Joe up from the mall, and they play games, and talk as they start to build a relationship in the limited time before the world resets. Roy always wants to tell Joe the truth that he's his father, but fear holds him back each time. Then, on loop 249, everything changes. As the two casually talk, Roy mentions Gemma's work, and Joe replies that he had spoken to her that morning. That was when Roy realized that she hadn't died the night before. This changes everything as he realizes that there's still time to save her. In the next loop, Roy infiltrates the lab again. This time, he goes directly inside and shoots both Brett and Ventor. After pressing Brett for answers, he learns that Jemma sabotaged the Osiris Spindle after realizing they were misusing it. Now it's triggering an unstoppable chain reaction. In the end, Ventor finally realizes the truth that Roy is the missing piece. His ability to infiltrate the lab is because the spindle is working and it's keyed to him. When Roy checks the security footage, he discovers that Gemma dies exactly 14 minutes after he wakes up each day. He realizes that there's a narrow window for him to rescue her. So, he resets again, but this time with a single goal: to save Gemma. The day begins as usual as Roy dispatches the first assassin, but he eventually changes his routine. Instead, he dives out his apartment window and hijacks the helicopter and forces the pilot to fly straight to the lab. He then arms himself with the chopper's machine gun and blasts his way through the building. Inside, he reaches Gemma's lab just as Brett is attacking her. Roy immediately kills both Brett and Ventor as he's finally reunited with Gemma. She asks how many times it took to get here. Although he says once, she knows better as she hears him speak about Joe, revealing all the things he's learned through the loops. She understands how much he sacrificed. Gemma then delivers the hard truth that the spindle can't be stopped. But there may be one solution. Roy must enter into the machine. The device was built to match his DNA, and if it works, it'll reset the day just once more, hopefully restoring the timeline and ending the loop for good. But if it fails, Roy dies permanently. Despite the uncertainty, Roy is at peace. He finally knows what matters. After a final goodbye kiss, he steps into the Osiris Spindle, ready to risk everything, for Gemma, for Joe, and for the chance to make things right one last time. And that is the story of the 2020 action sci-fi movie boss level. If you enjoyed the recap and would want to see more of this kind of videos, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment for us. Until our next recap, stay safe.